Hi, I'm David Hawthorne, and this is my story. My freshman year of undergrad is when I noticed I had a problem. I had just moved to a large city from my small hometown. My major in chemistry was very intense. I was taking 19 credits and determined to do well. My girlfriend, who would later become my wife, came to school with me, and maintaining our relationship became another task on my exhaustive list of duties. Things were not going great for my family back at home, and I felt the added pressure to succeed. I was used to feeling anxious, but what I was feeling during this time wasn't normal. In the past, if I failed or felt embarrassed, I could shake it off. In this new environment, my resiliency was gone. I didn't believe in myself anymore, and I had a huge problem with negative self-talk. I would spend a lot of time and effort avoiding awkward moments and challenges because I feared failing. I spent so much time tearing myself down that I didn't know who I was anymore. I became very good at hiding my depression and anxiety. I began to feel uneasy speaking in class. I would worry weeks before presentations or social gatherings. I had difficulty with and lacked the desire to make new friends. The most stressful thing for me during this time was figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. I liked to pretend that I had everything figured out. The direction of my life was based on what would make other people happy rather than myself. I was a great student, but I wasn't perfect. I decided to change my major and explore less difficult options, not because I was doing poorly, because I wasn't, but because I didn't want to fail. Senior year of undergrad, I realized I had made a mistake. It was too late. Everyone wanted to know what I was going to do, and I didn't know anymore. I felt like my life, my money, and my potential was wasted. On my graduation day, I got married and had recently moved into a new apartment a little outside the city. I had decided on a graduate program at a nearby school to attend, but I wasn't certain of my choice. I struggled with my decision. I felt like I was making another mistake. I spiraled into depression before the fall semester. My anxiety caused me to miss my program's orientation and almost made me miss my first day of classes. Just like before, I struggled in my new environment. The combination of all of these new changes elevated my anxiety and proved to be more debilitating than before. Talking to my wife about how I was feeling was hard. I finally had the time and courage to set up an appointment at my school's counseling center. I remember feeling embarrassed sitting in the waiting area. I didn't want anyone to know that I was there, that I needed help. I didn't want anyone to see me. My counselor told me what I was feeling was normal. We talked a lot and tried to make sense of my condition. She connected my childhood to my anxiety and depression. I grew up in a home with a drug-addicted parent. Like many people on drugs, he stole from, lied to, and manipulated me and my family to satisfy his condition. I had to grow up fast. I learned not to trust people and how to keep my emotions to myself. My father and I had the same name, so building my identity and not becoming like him was of the utmost importance to me. I put all my energy in school and put a lot of pressure on myself to succeed. The behaviors that I learned when I was young were the precursors to my anxiety. Talking about my experience was difficult. I was very guarded at first, and admittedly, there were things that I didn't share with my counselor, even though I knew I was in a safe place. However, talking helped. I felt a tremendous weight lifted off my shoulders. I'll start a therapy group to share my story and learn more about people who may be feeling like I did. I'm becoming more aware of my emotions and learning ways to limit my negative self-talk. I'm learning how to accept my shortcomings and how to not put so much pressure on myself. While I still struggle with my anxiety, and my journey is still not complete, I'm getting better. Thank you.
So my story, my journey with mental illness starts about a little over 10 years ago. I had experienced a week-long period of not being able to sleep. I was in a very high stressful job and was working very long hours. And so I would, work really hard during the day, and then I would come home at night and I wouldn't be able to shut it down. So I would work again, late at night, and then not be able to fall asleep. And I didn't recognize this as a symptom until it was too late at that point. So a week without sleep, I ended up in a manic episode, and my husband noticed something was wrong and called the advice nurse line from our health insurance. And the nurse talked to him about my symptoms and said, it sounds like she's going through a psychiatric emergency and you need to get her to the hospital. But you can't drive her yourself because she may grab the wheel, and so it could be a dangerous situation. So this nurse recommended to him that he call 911. So he had to call, and EMTs came to our house. I was taken by ambulance to the hospital, where in the emergency room they, addressed my symptoms and evaluated me and realized that I was going through a psychiatric crisis and I needed to go to a psychiatric hospital. So I was transferred, and I was there for a few days and stabilized, and came out and saw the psychiatrist for the first time and told him about my history. Before that, I had no history of mental health issues, so it was very shocking. And he said, it sounds like that whole episode was due to lack of sleep, and so, you don't have to take that medication anymore, just go back to your normal life and you should be fine, which I did, hoping that was the case, but it wasn't. And 2 weeks later, I suffered another manic episode, and I ended up in the hospital on Christmas Day, and it was a terrible, terrible day. It was awful. I was in the hospital for 3 or 4 days when my parents found a psychiatrist that they wanted me to see, so I came out of the hospital and saw that doctor, and he kind of diagnosed me at that point with bipolar disorder from the symptoms that I had been having for the past month. And I started on some medication that did help control my symptoms. And I tried to go back to work. It was really hard because, again, I was devastated by this diagnosis of a mental illness, and I was fearful of what people would think of me. So I hid it and just, blamed it on stress and whatnot. And so going back to work was nearly impossible. I couldn't function. I had very severe anxiety. And so trying to get my illness under control, I decided the best thing to do would be to resign. And so I made that difficult decision to take a step back and focus on my mental health. And what resulted was a depressive episode. I was, just so in such a bad place because I felt like my job and my career up until that point had become my identity. And so I spent time, for that year really working on my mental health, seeing doctor after doctor and lots of therapists and getting lots of second opinions and trying different medications until finally I found something that worked for me. And I was lucky. And then my husband and I wanted to have a family. And so from that point, I wanted to, do the best I could off medication. I tried to be off the medication during the pregnancy, which was okay, but then afterwards I ended up in the hospital again for a third time and knew that I really needed to take control of the illness. It was going to be something serious for the rest of my life. We ended up having another child, a second child, and I was hospitalized during that time I was pregnant with her. And after that whole period of time, I looked back on, being in the hospital 4 times and realized, this is going to be something I'll live with forever, and I'm going to commit to my medication, I'm going to commit to my treatment plan, and I'm going to start talking openly about it because I want others to know that there is hope and you can get better and you can have a successful life. And so I started writing, and from there, I just noticed the power of being open about your story, and so many other people open up to you. So my story really ends with, it does get better, and you can live a good life despite having a mental illness. And that's all I have for my story, so thank you.
Hi, my name is Adrienne Griffin, and this is my story about my experience with postpartum depression. I have always been brave. In the 1980s, I survived shoulder pads, big hair, and the United States Naval Academy. In the 1990s, I went to Somalia during that country's famine and civil war. And then I came home and worked for the IRS. I thought I was brave. But then I had a baby, and I had postpartum depression. So instead of enjoying what is supposed to be the happiest time in a woman's life, I was overwhelmed and anxious and irritable. I was so horrible to my family that I thought they would be better off without me. And so I ran away. Literally. I got in the car, I drove away, and I left my husband and my 2-year-old and newborn. But I went back. That's how I knew I was brave. It turns out that 1 in 5 new mothers have to be brave to overcome postpartum depression. In fact, this illness is the most common complication of pregnancy and childbirth. Like these new mothers, I wondered, why do I have to be brave? Seriously, I was already doing my part. We spent 9 months being weighty and poked and prodded, diligently attending every childbirthing class and breastfeeding class, reading all the books, buying all the gear, listening to all the well-meaning advice. And then we survived labor and delivery, somehow helping a small human being escape our bodies. We survived sleep deprivation and all the craziness of breastfeeding. And we also have to be brave? I mean, seriously, isn't this someone else's job? I mean, why couldn't my husband be brave? Or my doctor, my lactation consultant, my next door neighbor, or my sister, or my children's pediatrician, who I called 5 times a day because I kept thinking there was something wrong with the baby. But in fact, there was something wrong with me. Being brave meant asking for help over and over and over for 6 months until I finally found someone who understood what I was going through. Being brave meant instead of suffering silently, I chose to start a support group, raise money, and talk to as many people about my experience with postpartum depression. Being brave means never giving up, taking one day at a time, asking for help, and not being perfect. You know, there's a time about 25 years ago when we would have whispered, breast cancer. Now, we all talk about breast cancer. We talk about it at cocktail parties. My mother and her friends go for an annual outing for a mammogram and shopping. I mean, professional football players wear pink socks in October to raise awareness about breast cancer. Seems to me we need to talk about mental health complications with the same openness, compassion, and understanding that we talk about physical health. It's my hope that within the next 25 years, no, actually in the next 5 years, that every new mother will receive information about mental health complications and have access to help. Because if a mom's not happy, then nobody is happy. So what do I say to a new mom who's going through postpartum depression? You are not alone. You are not to blame. And with help, you will be well. Thank you.